We're all good, Jenno. Here we are, officially with the Team Tszyu 2 and Tim Tszyu's manager, Glen Jennings. On a big day, we've had a massive announcement this morning and obviously a lot of airwaves last night. Glen, welcome to FightHype.com. And, mate, massive news for you and your team there at Tim Tszyu.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. Always good to have a yarn, mate. It is massive news. It's been a culmination of a lot of work to get this over the line, and we're very happy with the progress to date and super excited for Tim to get to show his wares on the big American stage.
For those who don't know, and I think everyone in boxing across the world knows, that Tim Tszyu will defend his WBO super welterweight world title on March the 30th at the MGM Grand, presented by Premium Boxing Champions in conjunction with TGB and the boys from No Limit. Keith Thurman, there's been so many names that have thrown around, you know, the last probably 2 months over Christmas and whatnot, Glenn, but Keith Thurman is the man, 30-1. For those who don't know, and most people do know, his last loss was to the legendary Manny Pacquiao. No slouch, a big name in boxing. You guys, I know you're not going to overlook him, but tell us how he came about, and then we'll get to other people that potentially might have pulled out and didn't want to fight Tim Tszyu.
Yeah, look, it's always an interesting process to go through because the Americans tend to wave their hands and get loud very early on and want to take a fight and say, yes, we'll take the fight. And then for whatever reason, and I can't even guess what their reasons are, they disappear and they're nowhere to be found, or they find a reason not to fight. We tend to be more turned on to the fight in Australia. Our guys just want to fight. So we went through the names. You know who they all are. There's some of them we still don't know where they are. They're in hiding somewhere. Contracts, offers, all sorts of things went out and about, mate. And at the end of the day, I think in today's world of when you're managing these guys and you're working with great promoters, you've got to have option A, B, and C in the pot and just hope you can land one of them. And for us, we got close on a couple, but we ended up landing Keith Thurman, and we're ecstatic about it. He's a big name. He's certainly capable, and he's a very skilled fighter. People are saying he's been out of the ring for a while. Well, I mean, he's obviously has a belief that he can beat Tim Tszyu. Otherwise, he wouldn't be saying, yeah, so let me sign the contract.
Been in some big names. He's defeated Danny Garcia, Sean Porter, and other big names. And obviously that close fight in the latter stages against Manny Pacquiao. When did you and your team sort of get real close to, when did Thurman sort of negotiate this fight with, off the back of another potential name, which was Erickson Lubin, that was sort of thrown around late last year, but 2 weeks ago was sort of put to bed?
Yeah, look, you may have seen some of the stories that came out of the US about Erickson Lubin. We were fairly confident that we'd get that done. In fact, we believed we were done, and unfortunately, for whatever reason, just another phone call out of the blue one day to say that Erickson Lubin is out. And so we keep on moving on with our other options. And it's only really been, mate, in all honesty, about the last 3 weeks.
Yeah.
So Keith Thurman's people were very good to work with, and they wanted this fight, and they see it as an opportunity to create a big hype for him. And so, yeah, look, we were grateful. You are grateful in Australia when you finally get someone to sign and say, yeah, they're doing it. You know, boxing, mate, it's a funny game. I won't be personally satisfied until the bell rings and they're both in the ring. Until then, we just hope and pray that all the good work pays off.
What can you tell the fans? What are you guys there, and what does Tim Tszyu know about what Keith Thurman brings to the table? And has he been someone that you've been looking at the last couple of years, just keeping an eye on, just in case he was going to move to 154, and now we know that he has?
Yeah, look, again, it's not uncommon knowledge that there's a group of very talented 147s that want to move to 154. They want that smoke up there. Some of them made that call prior to Tim becoming a world champ. As you know, Terence Crawford's people have been in discussions with us as well for Terence to go to 154. There's been some big names and there's some big opportunities. For the Thurman camp, I think it was, for them, the best fight that they could choose right now to get him back in the ring and to rebirth him, so to speak. I guess they're looking at a big upset against Tim Tszyu to re-elevate their boy, and we'll go with that. We're happy to take on Thurman, and as I said many times, there's nobody 147, 154 or 160 that we're in fear of. So the options are all in our favour, actually, Nick. So some of these other boys are struggling to make their fights, and they're now coming in and making the call to us. So good position to be in, but always respectful of the fact that every fight for Tim Tszyu now is a fight for him to retain his belt and for him to move on to become unified and one day undisputed. So it's exciting times, mate, and great to see that some special history and lineage gets attached to this fight.
And we'll get into that in a second. For those who don't know, the last time that a Tszyu name fought in the MGM Grand. And for those who don't know, the MGM Grand has been listed, but this fight could move. It could end up at T-Mobile Arena. We know it is in Las Vegas, but for you personally, the last time that you went there with a Tszyu man was in 2001 on November the 3rd with Zab Judah. Talk about that, Glenn. I know you've been back since, but how will that be for you personally as a manager to go back there with the son of Costa walking out into that probably sold-out arena?
Yeah, very, very humbling and very, what's the word you'd use? It's nostalgia recreated, and it's something I'm really excited for Tim for, more so than myself. But I always remember, Nick, the MGM Grand out on the strip, the sign that has goes left and right on the strip. It was a much smaller sign. Today it's a massive sign. And I said to Tim just the other day about that getting the opportunity to fight at the MGM Grand, it'll be very sentimental for me to see Tim up there on that same screen some, God knows how many, what did you say, 2001? 23 years later.
Yeah, 2001, November the 3rd, November the 4th for us back here. So
I'd love the same result.
23 years.
Yeah, I'd love the same result. It was a testing couple of weeks over there, the Zab Judah entourage and the fun and games we had with them, but I would love the same result.
Yeah, exactly. You guys fought obviously 3 years ago up there in at the Armory in Minnesota. Now, Tim, yourself, your vision has always been to really be zoned in on America in Las Vegas. Talk about, with Tim, you obviously set up camp. You know, you might do a bit of it in Los Angeles. You'll do a little bit in Vegas, but really branching out and taking, like, I know the last time was obviously a very big show, but with this one, this is main event. This is the first time pay-per-view. And for your boy, he's actually kicking off the Amazon Prime in conjunction with Premium Boxing Champions as the first fighter to headline that event. There's so many moving factors for Team Tszyu too.
There is, and attached to that, mate, is an excitement for us. One, first and foremost, Tim will be the first Australian fighter to fight pay-per-view into the United States, where the pay-per-view American audience pay for this service. So that's a first. The other first, of course, as you know, is that Amazon Prime doing their very first show. There's only one inaugural and there's only one debut, and Tim will be that main event. So that's another exciting chapter. That also brings with it some prestige and nostalgia that doesn't go with most other fights. And so I would expect that if Amazon Prime are doing their inaugural show, it'll be something spectacular. And I would think that for us personally, we want something spectacular for Tim being the first guy to do the pay-per-view. The fact that it's in Vegas, the fact that it's at MGM, the fact that you've got Keith Thurman, who's a very gifted talker, loves a chat, loves to sell the fight, can back it up in the ring. It's going to be a really, really great package in terms of, for the first time. Amazon Prime has 166 million viewers. It's massive, and so there's a great opportunity for it to do well in the United States, and there's an absolute wanting now from the American fans to have a look at Tim Tszyu. It took us a while. You've seen us build Tim up through the ranks. We've done all the Australian stuff. We went to regionals. We moved on. We went overseas. We've done that. He's now world champ, and the Americans are now starting to say, we know his name. We remember his name. Now let's go and have a look at this kid, because he's a special fighter. And we expect Tim will go on from this, and we expect 2024, given the opportunities and the other fighters who want a piece of him, and they're not necessarily saying they want it now. I think we'll have a very busy 2024, and I think they're all going to be big name mega fights, which is where you want to be. That's where we want to be, and that's what I want for Tim. And Tim just has to deliver. He's got to win. The rest of the stuff we'll take care of.
This is a great one for you and you guys to showcase who Tim Tszyu is. I know you went there, like we said, 3 years ago, but now Tim's a very different fighter to he was 3 years ago. One name that was thrown around, and obviously I think this fight could happen in due time, was Terence Crawford. But particularly looking at becoming or trying to, if he would have to defeat Tim at 154 to become a 4-division world champion. In all honesty, Glenn, we could have sort of knew that it wouldn't be the next fight, and being a smart manager, it wouldn't be the next fight. But for Tim would do that fight now straight up, wouldn't he?
Yes, 100%. I mean, they came in. The discussions were reasonably late, and had they been earlier, there's a real chance that we may have been able to make that happen with our promoters, Matty Rose. Matty's been literally working 3 or 4 options against all big name fighters, and as you know, someone has to win it, and there has to be a cut-off date, and you do sometimes just run out of time trying to make it all the pieces fit together. But Terence Crawford and his people are very respectful. They particularly like Tim Tszyu. They do know that he's a very good fighter, and they're quite happy to say that. So I think it's a good fight, another great fight for TV, and another great opportunity for Tim. But it has to be within the right time frame. And when you're launching into a US market like we are, it was always about a name. Lubin, Thurman, all of those guys are great names. So is Crawford. But I think any smart manager will tell you that sometimes the longer you leave the wine bottle on the rack, the more expensive and the more opportunities that come. So stay tuned for 2024 for Tszyu. We'll take care of Thurman first, and then there's another name that we don't know is in hiding, Jamel Charlo. Where is he?
I was going to get
Where are you, Jamel? He's not off our radar. We're not letting him go. People are saying, he's disappeared. He doesn't want to fight. He's doing this. Well, we're not going to let up on that. We want that fight this year. So I guess you can imagine, you got Errol Spence at 154. There's names aplenty, and they're all mega fights. Can you imagine if you were fortunate enough to announce that, hey, Tim's next 4 fights for the fun of it, just in a fantasy world, Keith Thurman, Errol Spence, Bud Crawford and Jamel Charlo in 1 year? Wow.
So for you, obviously, March 30th, you'll kick off Amazon Prime, which is absolutely fantastic. For you and for Tim, who I know personally, you want to keep active. Is your vision for a manager this year, and his manager's a fighter, that he says to you as a manager, I want to fight 3 times this year, or is it more, American, we're going to only do it twice this year? What's the vision?
No, we'll be fighting as often as we can.
Wow.
And that, of course, that'll be determined on the outcome of each fight, any injuries, any problems that come from that fight, and, of course, the availability of opponents. And as you've seen, typically with what happened with Charlo, we went into camp, we were out of camp, we're in camp. Everyone experiences these difficulties. It's part of boxing. We understand that. But when we're very fortunate in the position that we're in, and Tim holding the belt, we might be able to move on and unify another belt. And there is another series of guys that hold belts at 154 that we haven't even talked about, and new world champions that'll come through very soon. They'll all be available to us as well, should the mega guys decide for whatever reason that they want to stay on holidays or cruise the Caribbean instead of fighting, whatever. I can tell you this, that Tim Tszyu will fight as often as we can allow him, with common sense and good management, reminding everyone that his health and his welfare is paramount.
And for you guys with Al Heyman and Tom Brown and the fantastic team at TGB and Premier Boxing Champions, where most of these names fall under the Premier Boxing Champions banner, Glenn. Yeah,
that's true. And that's another advantage that we have, is that the channels are, whilst you're discussing fighter A, B, C, D, and perhaps F, are all with that same promoter. So those are already in discussion. Those are being talked about. It's not like you've got to go back to square one. So it's not within it's not out of the question that Matty Rose would be talking about 1, 2, and 3 fights already. I know we have, and I know he's got a plan, and I've given him what I want. He tries to then go and patch that into what the promoters want, and we try to make the deals. So it's good, man. It's good. It's sometimes people say monopolies with fighters aren't great, but when it comes down to negotiating on the one pathway with the one promoter overseas, it's quite helpful.
Keith Thurman, March the 30th. We spoke about Charlo before. Charlo's still on the radar. We haven't seen him after he went into hiding after the Canelo fight. Providing you guys get through Thurman, is that something where you will call out and say, Jamel, we had the contract signed, we'll sign up for January 20th for 2023. Would that be the next fight that you'd want to go with and get that out of the way?
He's with PBC, so he's in that loop already. What'll happen for us, again, if you talk about the luxury, so to speak, of having most of those guys with PBC, you can bet those discussions have already taken place, and whether or not they're available, whether or not PBC want them to fight Tim, all those things will come into play. But right now it's purely Keith Thurman. We'll take care of that. In the background, Matt and I will be working on the next fight and the next fight. So rest assured, I think all going well without injury, you'll see plenty of Tim this year in the US. And each fight, I hope, is a step up for Tim. And ultimately, my personal desire hasn't changed from last year. I would love Tim to be undisputed by the end of 2024 in the 154s. And then we choose where we go from there.
Because you'd obviously have to see, well, Jamel would have to do this. He would have to have a fight probably in April, May, and then maybe, Charlo versus Tszyu could happen in sort of August.
Yeah, there's a lot of pieces, mate. There's a ton of pieces.
Moving.
A lot of moving parts, but that's boxing. I mean, you're talking about so many different personalities, and you're talking about substantial amounts of money now. So all of that comes into play, and I think the heart and the desire has to be there too. There's always, everyone's got an opinion of every fighter. Tim is prepared to take on any of those names, and given the opportunity, we will. It's as simple as that. We stand behind that. But they've got to be also prepared to sign the contract and turn up. It's no good going through 6-8 weeks of the motion and then saying no. That's no good to anybody. That's just downtime. And in the career of a pro fighter, your window is very small. Got to make the most of the time. You can't be sitting on the bench waiting for people to change their mind or sort out their personal lives.
Another one that I've seen that Tim sort of zoned in on a little bit, and he sort of has mentioned this previously, is Errol Spence. Obviously, he had the damaging loss against Terence Crawford. There's been rumours about cataracts and photos going up. Is that another one where you're looking as a manager that Spence, we are looking to do you at 154 when you move up, or if you do move up? Is he another one that would potentially be on the radar, after this fight?
Yeah, Errol's very much on our radar. He's already ranked at 154. He's made the move. He's stated he won't go back to 147. And of course, for Errol coming up to 154s, he brings a lot with him, and he'll bring a lot. He's a very good seller. He's a big attraction. Yes, he copped a tough night against Terence Crawford, but you can't take away from the fact that he's an amazing fighter and a terrific athlete. And I think that's a great fight for Tim. I really do. I'd be happy to entertain Errol Spence as soon as we can. But again, I'm happy to entertain any of them as soon as we can, provided we can get it done and it commercially makes sense and they want it as much as we do. But I tell you now, mate, it's nice to be able, when someone says, hey, mate, would you consider blah, 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 and you say, yeah, we'll take all of them.
Really? I suppose for Al Heyman and TGB, they've got a guy that's coming over here. We know obviously about the name, but he's wanting to get away from that son of Costa, and he's willing to take on any of those guys. Yeah,
Tim's a different guy, mate. I believe it's an Australian thing. I really do. You look at our Australian fighters in general, not all, but in general, they all want to fight the best and fight them now. Like we tend to breed fighters that want to fight. The Americans reach a point in fighting where they want to fight, but they don't.
Yeah.
And the distractions and the nonsense that gets in the way ruins many a chance for these guys to make a lot more money and have a lot more fights than they do, for whatever reason, always bemuses me. I don't get it. As a manager, you always have to look, for me, this is how I look at business. When you manage the business of boxing, you've got someone special like Tim Tszyu. I would love to have Tim, when he finishes, when he's 35, 37, to be financially secure, to be in a position where he's got a very good life, because he's got a lot of living to do afterwards. So my goal for him is to get out there and do this in a time frame that protects his health, but increases his wealth and his welfare to a point that he lives a comfortable life afterwards. I don't know if there's that much forethought goes into it elsewhere, because you got guys that are, look at Jamal Charlo. He's a potential huge earner. And how long did he sit out for, Nick? Was it nearly 3 years?
He sat out for a long time. I think it was just under 3 years, 2 years and 9 months. Yeah, it was long.
Massive amount of time out of the ring, and what earning potential disappears, and what fights and what legacy disappears. So I just think the Australian promoters, and that's all of them, the Australian fighters and all their trainers, that we have a different view on this. And our guys are busting their ass to get opportunities in America, and some of them are going to, and it's going to be a great year for Aussie boxing, without a doubt. But for Tim Tszyu, he's a different machine, mate. He just wants to fight. And so I can tell you, after Mendoza, in the dressing room, he said, "Are you on what's next? Where are we at?" Because I don't talk to him. I don't discuss this stuff. It's a distraction. And so he wants to know the very next day, what are we doing? When do I go into camp? And it's like, shit, give me a break. I wouldn't mind a couple of days off. But that's who he is. And that's, I believe, the reason why he is where he is today. And his younger brother is exactly the same.